Have you ever thought to yourself, how do I know as a homeowner when my septic system failed? Well, today I want to kind of go through a few of the potential things that can happen when a septic system is failing or it's about to fail and what you should be looking for as a homeowner. So let's go ahead and hop into it. Before we can get into failures, we kind of have to discuss a little bit about what should a septic system look like. Now, we've covered septic systems in the past, so we all should have a basic understanding, but the gist of it is you have a large concrete box. Usually they're 10 by 5 or 8 by 4, so they're going to be a nice rectangular size, and generally they'll be anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500 gallons, give or take, right? Now, the goal of your septic tank is to capture solids, so every toilet flush, sink, shower, all that good stuff goes through the sewer pipe and into the tank. Heavy stuff falls to the bottom, that's called sludge. Lighter stuff goes to the top, that's called scum. In the middle, you're going to have your liquid layer, sometimes referred to as wastewater, sometimes black water, sometimes effluent. Doesn't matter for this particular video, but it's the poo water, right? So the goal of your septic tank is to clarify the liquid. And the reason why you want to clarify the liquid is so that the absorption system lasts as long as physically possible. Now, the tank itself generally lasts around 60 to 80 years. The concrete will start to degrade based off of the sewer gases. Most common failures that I find for a tank is actually going to be the seal that joins the two halves together. Back in the day, a lot of these tanks would be made what's called a mid-seam, right? And so what a mid-seam is, where you take half the tank, the other half of the tank, you put them together, and you use a seal in the middle to make it to where the tank is watertight. The problem is that seal will eventually fail. Nowadays, that's why a majority of your tanks are going to be top seam. So in a watertight septic tank, the water should always be at the invert of the outlet. You might be saying, what does that mean? So if you draw the circle, all right, the bottom of that circle is going to be the invert. It's going to be the real bottom part where the water should sit because everything's gravity fed. So as you put water in, the water that's going above that pipe should spill out and over into the absorption system. Most commonly, you'll see septic systems are accessible by a manhole riser. They come in a variety of shapes and colors, but this particular one is going to be concrete. Sometimes they're plastic, sometimes they're black, sometimes they're green, sometimes they're blue. Doesn't matter. They're usually going to have some kind of access point just like this. The goal of that pipe or riser is so that way when you pop it open, one, you can easily see where the water level in the tank is, and two, so you can actually pump the tank more efficiently. A lot of older systems would only have a little 6-inch clean out, which is going to look like this. This is a clean out. Now, this particular one's a cast iron clean out, so it's much older, but you would see these a lot on older systems. You'll still see them nowadays, but particularly you'll see them over the inlet or the outlet of a septic system. A majority of these systems will have 2 lids in every riser. The purpose is for safety. So you'll have this lid as your main lid. This one is your safety lid. The purpose of having a safety lid such as this is so that if for whatever reason somebody's able to move this or breaks this, that lid should catch them and prevent them from falling into there. That is going to be about 5 foot of sewage, and that's one heck of a way to go. So that's why it's important to always make sure that that lid's in place. So the purpose of opening these risers is so that way you can look inside and see what do you see. Now, if you open that lid and you see toilet paper stuck to the wall or like a real even black line staining the concrete, that usually means that the water level's risen and stayed there for an extended period of time. This is incredibly characteristic for a backup. So you want to pop this lid open just to see what's going on. The next thing you're going to want to do is look inside of the actual dry wells or look at the drain field. Now, a dry well and a drain field do roughly the same thing, but they're just slightly different. So we've covered them in the past, but a brief rundown of this is a drain field is a skinny and long trench. Think about like a French drain. Usually in our area, they're about 2 to 3 feet wide, 5 to 10 feet deep, and they'll be between 30 and 100 feet long. Then they're going to be backfilled with number 2 limestone and a perforated pipe. So the goal is, as you introduce water into the tank, the water will then spill over into the drain field, which will then leach its way into the surrounding soil. A dry well does a similar concept, except for instead of being skinny and long, it'll be tall and wide. Generally, they're between 4 and 10 feet deep, 6 to 8 feet round, and they're going to have a bunch of cinder block put as like a think of like a silo, right? You have dry stack cinder block in a circle and stone on the exterior. So that way as water comes in, it'll work its way through the cracks in the cinder block into the surrounding soil, and then nature just takes it away, right? Both of these fail relatively the same, but let's go ahead and look at how a dry well fails first, and then we're going to talk about a drain field. Very first thing we want to make sure we do when it comes to looking at a dry well is identify the clean out, which we just showed you a second ago. Pop it open and then look inside. So let's go ahead and turn this around, look inside this dry well and see what do we have going on. So we can see our clean out right here, and if we look inside, you'll see the block walls. Now, unfortunately, this clean out is a little bit cockeyed, so it's a little bit harder to see what's going on. But basically what you want to do is you want to look inside of here. How much space do you see? Do you see any space at all? Do you see water? If it's touching this clean out, something must have gone wrong. The goal of this clean out is to basically act as an observation port, so that way you as a homeowner or your service contractor can open it up and see what's going on. The water in a functional system should dissipate into the surrounding soil, but no matter what you do, everything breaks at some point or other. So one day that water level will start to rise and rise and rise some more until eventually it starts to back up. So if you're curious, is it my tank? Is it my pipe? Is it my dry well? The first thing you want to do, pop open the septic system, the tank itself, right? That manhole riser that we just looked at. Is the water level where it belongs? Ideally, it's going to be between 8 inches to 15 inches, maybe 16 inches below the ceiling. So if you've got some space between the tank ceiling and the liquid, usually you're fine. If you have no space, that means that the issue's further behind the tank. If you open the tank and the water level's where it belongs and it's still backing up in the house, that means you have an issue between the home and the tank, most likely a clog in the sewer line. This can happen with flushable wipes, feminine products, condoms, cigarette butts, all that good stuff. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about on the back end. So if it's not the tank, if it's further behind, the next thing you want to look at is inside of that clean out. If the water's touching the pipe, that means it's backed up and it's game over. If the water level's low like this one and it's backed up in the tank, that might mean you have an issue with the piping or the distribution box. A distribution box will look like this, where basically you have a small little concrete structure where you'll have your pipe from the tank come into here. As you can see, we've got water flowing right now, so we can see how everything's dispersing. The water would come into the box and then it would evenly disperse into your piping. So we have our dry well here, drain field here, and then behind the lid there's another dry well. So what'll happen is, as the water comes in, it should evenly disperse between the two, or between the three. But we can see that that little piece of concrete is preventing most of the water from getting into that pipe, meaning this is our primary system. The water level in the distribution box should look very similar to the water level in a septic tank. It should always be at the bottom of the outlet line, the invert of the outlet. So in this particular circumstance, the outlet becomes the line to the drain field. The inlet becomes the line from the tank. So we can see that the water level is at the correct level in the distribution box. Most homeowners, unless you have this thing accessible at grade, the odds of you finding it or having it readily accessible are pretty low. Modern septic systems are going to have a minimum of 4-inch cap or a manhole riser to the surface so you can see what's going on. You can maintain everything. As a homeowner, you can pop it open for yourself and take a look. So this one is a little bit harder for homeowners to find, but what you can do to check to see if water's getting from the tank to the pit is just open up the observation port on the pit itself. Now, the general expected lifespan of a functional septic system should be around 30 to 40 years, give or take. I would argue in practice, it usually ends up being closer to 50 years. It just depends on how well you pump your tank and how much water you're putting through the system. So we've talked about dry wells, but now we got to figure out, how do you check a drain field? So a drain field is going to kind of fail in a little bit of a different way. Modern systems will have an observation port on the end of the trench, just like you would see on a dry well, but older systems didn't have that. In our area, you're less likely to find an observation port on any system older than 2010, so you have to use a probe. The probe that we use is this one. Basically, it's a sharp stick that you stick into the stone, see what it does. Ideally, nothing. You want to see dry, plain Jane stone. You don't want to see any moisture. You don't want to see any kind of shenanigans going on at all. When you're trying to identify where the drain field is, I always recommend look for discoloration in the grass. If you look at the screen right now, it should come through, but you can see right here is some discoloration. So then we look at our distribution box and we say, all right, do these kind of line up? And in this particular circumstance, no, they don't. But if we look at the grass, you can see where it actually looks like it trenches down and then hooks right and then it'll continue going that way. Drain fields in our area will always go perpendicular to the hill, right? You want to go on the basically to make sure that you're not having any of the water run directly through it. And if you run the drain field downhill, what'll happen is all that water will just go to the end. You'll have a blowout, and basically it'll all pond at the bottom, and you run the risk of having sewage water escape into the surrounding surface. So by running against the hill perpendicular wise, you're actually able to avoid some of those issues. So like, let's just say, for example, that you take all of your downspouts from the house, you run it down the hill. Well, if you have a 50-foot run going across the hill, you might swamp out a foot or two of the trench, but you can still use the remainder of the trench itself. It also makes it to where the water is able to more evenly disperse into the soil rather than having it all kind of pond in the bottom and hopefully work its way back up. If you're struggling to find your drain fields, the best advice I can give you is call the county health department, right? They should have something on file somewhere that says, hey, it's going to be 15 feet from the back of the house, or it's going to be over here. Look in this general area. Once you get a rough idea, is it in the front, back, side, where is it on the property? Then you got to use that probe in order to find it. So when we go in there with the probe, what we're looking for is the stone. So what I usually recommend is, if you can't find the trench itself based off of the grass, pick a spot, work your way every foot, probing down as far as you can until eventually you hit it. Sometimes there are going to be systems that are too deep where you just can't hit the stone at all. In this particular example, we're able to hit the stone. So let's go ahead and look, what does it sound like when we actually put that probe through the dirt? So this is our probe, and basically what we'll do is we're looking to see if we hear that crunching sound in the ground. And then we want to see any of that white stone dust on the end of the shaft. You may be wondering, well, how do you know if that's actually the drain field, not just some random pocket of stone? Good question. So if you hit the stone, what I always recommend, walk a foot or two to the left or right and see if you can hit it again. Once you do that process again until you get 3 or 4 solid hits in a straight line against the hill, same depths, same type of stone. Now what you're going to do is 5 feet, any direction, up or down, away from that trench, probe again. You shouldn't hit the stone, at least in our area. Your area might be different, but with the drain field being 2 feet, 3 feet wide, if you go 5 feet away from it, you should be very unlikely to hit that stone again, meaning you're on the trench. Now we know what the drain field should look like and how it should be functional, but let's talk about what happens when it's not doing what it's supposed to do. So the very first thing is identify where is our backup coming from. As we were discussing the pits, that's kind of what we already discussed, so we're going to ignore that part again. So we're going to presume that you already figured out the drain field's the problem. So how does that just basically show itself? The first thing you're going to notice potentially is marshiness in the soil surrounding the trench, right? So we could see in the trench field over here that we could see a dip in the ground. There was also some discoloration to the grass. Discoloration does not always mean that you have a failure in the system. The reason why is you're putting very nutritious water into the ground. Well, with that nitrogen and that nutrition, what'll happen is as the plants kind of start to suck up all that poo water, they're going to be far more fertilized. So you're actually just going to have healthy plants. And by healthy plants, I mean grass, because grass is a plant. So if you have a relatively shallow system like this one, you could at times see a more green portion of grass. But marshiness, that's where you want to be cautious. So if you have dark green grass and it's mushy, like far more mushy compared to everything else, and it hasn't rained for a while, now you might be in trouble. So the next step is to probe it, right? As these drain fields fail, when you probe them, sometimes they'll make an audible sound. They might gurgle, they might spurt, water might come out of it. The probe might be sopping wet. If that's the case, you probably have something else going on inside of the pit, or sorry, inside of the trenches that's not letting the water escape. Same concept as a pit, but basically when you put the water in, the water should work its way out into the surrounding soil. So if you probe it, water comes out, you're done. If it's super mushy and you have a backup in the system, more than likely you're done. And when a drain field is oversaturated, there's not much you can really do for it. You will see people say, if you use my product, it will fix the drain field. No, right? There might be some argument to it, but it has not been studied enough, and it has not been approved by at least Maryland Department of the Environment or any of the local health departments. They will allow you, however, to attempt to pull a permit and say, hey, we know we have a failure. We're going to use this product. It's experimental. Let's see what happens. They might say, all right, go for it. As long as it's not surfacing and you get an annual inspection to verify that it's not surfacing, they'll let it fly. I've seen plenty of people use these products and it doesn't do anything at all to help the systems. The old adage, if it's too good to be true, it probably is, applies to septic. You'll get a lot of people who will tell you for $40 you can fix your system, or for $200 you can fix your system. Most of the time, if the system's oversaturated, it's just time to put a new system in, let that thing dry out. Basically the only thing I have seen in practice work is if you put a new system in, let the old one dry out, the old one will start to recover a little bit and be able to be used in a limited capacity. If not, if you let it go long enough, you might be able to use it in a far longer capacity. So just put a new system in, stop trying to work your way around it. You might, as a temporary solution, be able to buy yourself some time so that way you can get the funds ready to put in the new drain field. Like, for example, if a pit fails, well, what you can do is you can pump it down. That'll buy you some time. It will not fix the problem, but it will buy you some time until you can get everything situated to put the new system in. Now, this is one of those systems or situations that sucks for a homeowner. So this is where it comes into proper inspection and proper maintenance. You want to make sure you pump out your tank regularly. Pumping it every couple years has been proven to help extend the life of the system. The University of Maryland discusses getting this done every 3 to 5 years. With everybody working from home as often as they do, I usually recommend consider maybe going every 2 or 3 years. The reason why is you're home more often, right? Most of our world has changed in the last couple of years, so you have to adapt a little bit. If you pump it more often, it's not going to hurt nothing. But if you wait 20 years, 30 years to pump your system, there have been proven cases of that causing more problems. You're going to see somebody who will tell you, I've lived here for so many years and I've never had a problem. They got lucky, right? A lot of those houses that claim that, they're adamant that they're right. Most of the time they're wrong, right? Most of the time those systems have failed and it's no longer doing what it's supposed to do. But every now and again they get lucky and it's actually working. Just because it worked for one guy does not mean it'll work for you. Go with the science, which has proven that pumping the tank will help to extend the life of the system. I know we talked about a lot today, right? Failed septic systems suck. It's never something fun. And as a homeowner, nobody likes to have to pay additional money for something that you don't ever really see or ever touch. You put it in the ground and can't ever see it ever again, but you spent 20 grand on it. I know it sucks. But these are systems that can cause health problems. So it's important to make sure that you know, how do you identify these problems? And if you're not comfortable doing that, hire somebody, right? It's always a good idea every 5 or 10 years, just have somebody give a little bit more of a thorough look through of your system just to make sure everything's doing what it's supposed to. But if you have that preemptive maintenance, you might be able to catch this before it becomes a larger problem, or you might be able to budget for that repair or replacement down the road. If you notice that you're only working with a little bit of space left in that dry well, if you're checking it every year, you might be able to figure out, oh crap, we're only losing 3 inches of space every year. I've got a foot left. I've got 4 years until I'm running into a problem. And then you can get all that money prepped so that way in 4 years when you do have that problem, you can address it immediately and you're not going to get hit with an unexpected expense. If you found this valuable, or if you gained any information out of this that you find useful, hit that like button, hit subscribe. I have more videos posted every day in the world of lawn and septic, and I look forward to talking to you guys tomorrow.